The silence of the void is usually a comfort to the alien people. For 10,000 cycles, the alien High Council had governed the glittering systems with a philosophy of absolute pacifism, relying on energy shielding and diplomacy to maintain their golden age. They were creatures of light and glass, fragile beings who viewed warfare as a barbaric relic of a forgotten past. But the silence of the void is not always empty. Sometimes it is merely holding its breath. When the warning chimes began to sing across the bridge of the orbital station sanctuary, they did not sound like alarms. They sounded like mourning bells. High Speaker Kalen stared at the holographic projection, his shimmering, translucent skin paling to a dull gray. The sensors were not detecting a diplomatic envoy. They were not detecting pirates. They were detecting the end. From the dark space between galaxies, the Krell scourge had arrived. The Krell were not a species in the traditional sense. They were a biological tide, a hive mind of chitin and acid that consumed organic matter to fuel their endless expansion. They did not negotiate. They did not pause. They simply ate. And they had just dropped out of warp space directly on top of Alien Prime, a planet of 4 billion souls who had forgotten how to make a fist. Kalen's trembling fingers hovered over the console. The alien defense grid was active, huge ribbons of hard light energy wrapping around the planet like a gift. But against the Krell, it was paper trying to hold back a tsunami. The first wave of bioships, massive hulks of pulsating meat and bone, crashed against the shields. The impact shook the station. The shields flared, then flickered. We are going to die, Kalen thought, the realization cold and absolute. The nearest Galactic Federation fleet was 3 standard weeks away. The Krell would strip the planet to the bedrock in 3 days. There was only one option left. It was a forbidden option, buried deep in the catastrophic emergency protocols. It was known as the Black Frequency. It was a distress signal sent not on the standard subspace bands used by civilized nations, but on the chaotic, high-energy wavelengths used by the species that lived in the dead zone. The species the Federation had quarantined for the safety of the galaxy. Kalen looked at his bridge crew. They were weeping, holding one another. He closed his eyes and keyed the sequence. The Black Frequency screamed out into the dark, a desperate, unencrypted plea. This is Alien Prime. We are under attack by a Krell hive fleet. Population 4 billion. We have no weapons. Requesting immediate aid. Anyone, please. The message went out, and the galaxy waited. For 10 minutes, there was nothing but the sickening sound of the Krell ships gnawing at the planetary shields. The energy barrier was turning red, buckling under the strain of millions of acid-spitting drones. Then, the communications console lit up. It wasn't a clean, digital ping. It was a roar of static, harsh and aggressive, cutting through the delicate alien systems like a buzzsaw. A voice broke through the noise. It sounded like gravel grinding against steel. It spoke the trade tongue, but with a guttural, terrifying accent. This is Admiral Vance of the United Earth Navy, 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. We hear you, alien. Hold the line. We are inbound. Kalen felt a shiver of pure terror ripple through his body. Humans. The stories of humanity were told to frighten children in the Federation. They were Death Worlders, evolved on a planet with crushing gravity, unstable tectonics, and apex predators that hunted for sport. They had not achieved spaceflight through harmony or meditation, but by harnessing the power of exploding atoms to hurl themselves off their own rock. They were considered unstable, violent, and insane. The Federation had drawn a border around their sector and marked it, "Do not enter." And now, they were coming here. How long? Kalen whispered into the comms, hoping the translation matrix would pick up his terrified voice. The Krell will breach in less than an hour. How far are you? The human voice laughed. It was a dry, humorless bark. Distance is irrelevant, High Speaker. We don't use the hyperlanes. Prepare for high-energy displacement. You might want to cover your ears. Cover my ears, Kalen thought. In the vacuum of space? The answer arrived 30 seconds later. Usually when ships exit hyperspace, it is a graceful event. A ripple of blue light, a gentle displacement of gravity. This was not that. Space above Alien Prime didn't ripple. It shattered. A tear in the fabric of reality ripped open, bleeding distinct, violent red radiation. It looked like a wound in the universe. Thunder, actual impossible thunder, seemed to vibrate through the hull of the sanctuary station, transmitted by the sheer gravitational violence of the arrival. From the red tear, they emerged. The alien bridge crew stopped weeping and stared in horror. The ships of the Galactic Federation were works of art. Sleek curves, white alloys, glowing nacelles. The human ships were nightmares. They were massive, blocky slabs of dark gray industrial metal. They had no elegance, no aerodynamics. They looked like office blocks welded to fusion engines. They bristled with kinetic batteries, missile pods, and massive spinal cannons. They were covered in scars, scorch marks, and crude paintings of bared teeth and predatory animals. They were ugly. They were terrifying. And there were hundreds of them. The lead ship, a dreadnought the size of a moon, bore the name Uns Indomitable, painted in white letters across a prow that looked designed to ram a star. On the bridge of the sanctuary, the sensor officer gasped. High Speaker, I am detecting no energy shields on the human vessels. Kalen stared. What? Their deflectors are down. No, sir, the officer stammered. They don't have deflectors. They just have armor. Meters and meters of physical armor. It was madness. To fly into a Krell swarm without energy shields was suicide. The acid would eat through metal in minutes. The Krell sensed the new prey. The hive mind shifted. A third of the swarm peeled away from the planetary shield and surged toward the human fleet. Millions of biodrones and cruiser-sized organisms. Admiral Vance's voice crackled over the open channel again. All ships. This is Vance. Rules of engagement are free fire. If it's not alien, turn it into paste. Weapons free. What happened next horrified the galaxy. Not because the humans lost, but because of how they fought. Civilized warfare was an exchange of coherent light beams and precision plasma. It was clean. It was surgical. Human warfare was a riot. The Indomitable didn't fire lasers. It fired solid slugs of tungsten, the size of ground cars, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. When the main batteries fired, the recoil was so immense the massive ship visibly shuddered. The rounds slammed into the Krell bioships with kinetic energy that defied belief. There was no cauterization, no clean holes. The Krell ships didn't explode. They liquefied. The impact force shattered their chitinous hulls and turned their insides into a mist of gore that froze instantly in the vacuum. The space between the fleets filled with trails of smoke and fire. Missiles, thousands of them, streaked out from the human lines. These weren't energy torpedoes. They were nuclear-tipped warheads. Flashes of blinding white light detonated silently in the void, incinerating entire clusters of Krell drones. The humans were using atomics. They were irradiating the immediate orbit. It was barbaric, it was messy, and it was devastatingly effective. But the Krell were endless. The swarm adapted, closing the distance, swarming over the human hulls like ants on a carcass. Kalen watched the tactical display, his heart pounding. They are being overrun, he whispered. Without shields, they cannot repel boarders. On the view screen, he saw a Krell boarding pod smash into the side of a human cruiser. The bioacid began to chew through the armor. "Admiral Vance!" Kalen cried out. "Your flank!" The cruiser. "Athens has been boarded. You must retreat." The response was calm, almost bored. "We know. Boarding action is part of the fun. Watch." Kalen zoomed the sensors in on the Athens. The hull wasn't being breached by the Krell. The humans were blowing the airlocks themselves. From the blown hatches, figures emerged. They were encased in bulky, power-assisted armor that made them look like walking tanks. They were magnetic booted to their own hull. They weren't fleeing, they were charging. In their hands, they held weapons that spat fire and spinning metal chains. They waded into the Krell swarm on the skin of their own ship, fighting hand to claw in the silent vacuum. Kalen watched a single human soldier grab a Krell warrior, a beast twice his size, and physically slam it against the hull before emptying a kinetic shotgun into its carapace. It wasn't war. It was a brawl. The humans were fighting with a ferocity that suggested they took the invasion personally. They didn't care about their own safety. The Athens, realizing it was too heavily infested, didn't self-destruct. Instead, it ignited its afterburners and rammed the nearest Krell mothership. The collision was catastrophic. The human cruiser drove itself deep into the organic meat of the Krell vessel like a dagger. Then, it detonated its reactor. Kalen gagged. They sacrificed themselves. "Standard procedure." Vance's voice came back, cold as ice. "Exchange rate is favorable. 1 cruiser for a mothership. We'll take that trade any day." The Krell, for the first time in recorded history, seemed confused. The hive mind understood preservation. It understood predator and prey. It did not understand a species that would burn down the house just to kill the spider. The Krell fleet began to hesitate. The momentum shifted. The human ships were taking massive damage. Armor ripped away, decks exposed to space. But they didn't slow down. If a gun was destroyed, they fired the other one. If the engines were hit, they used maneuvering thrusters to turn the ship into a spinning turret. But the true horror, the thing that would haunt the Alien Council for generations, was yet to come. The largest Krell biotitan, a creature the size of a small continent, began to descend toward the planet. It was ignoring the human fleet, intent on cracking the planetary crust to feed on the core. The alien shields were gone. If it landed, the planet died. "Admiral," Kalen screamed. "The Titan! It's past your blockade!" "I see it," Vance growled. "My heavy batteries can't track it fast enough. It's too close to the atmosphere. If I nuke it, the EMP will kill your planetary grid and half your population. Then we are lost." Kalen slumped. "Not yet," Vance said. "Initiate the Sledgehammer Protocol." "What is the Sledgehammer Protocol?" Kalen asked, terrified of the answer. "Physics," Vance said. From the center of the human formation, a ship detached. It wasn't a warship. It was a tug, basically a massive engine with a tow hook. It was towing a large, dense asteroid that the humans had apparently brought with them. "Why did you bring a rock to a space battle?" Kalen whispered. The tug ship disconnected the asteroid, spun around, and placed itself behind the rock. Then it overloaded its engines. The asteroid, a solid hunk of iron and nickel, was accelerated toward the planet. "You'll kill us all," Kalen shouted. "Trust the math," Vance snapped. The asteroid streaked past the sanctuary station. It wasn't aimed at the planet. It was aimed at the upper atmosphere, at a precise angle to intercept the descending Krell Titan. The collision occurred just above the stratosphere. The asteroid, moving at 20,000 kilometers per hour, struck the Krell Titan broadside. The impact was silent in space, but the visual was blinding. The Titan didn't just break, it vaporized. The kinetic energy transfer turned the massive biological ship into a rapidly expanding cloud of plasma and dust. The shockwave flattened the Krell escort drones for 1,000 kilometers. On the planet below, the sky turned a brilliant, bruised purple, but the atmosphere held. The debris burned up harmlessly as meteor showers. The Krell hive mind shrieked, a psychic scream that even the non-telepathic humans seemed to feel. The losses were unsustainable. The prey was too sharp, too hot, too crazy. The remaining Krell ships turned. They didn't retreat in good order. They routed. They warped out, leaving behind millions of tons of dead biomass, drifting in orbit. Silence returned to the Zygnur system. But it was not the peaceful silence of before. It was a heavy, smoky silence, filled with the debris of war. Kalen stared at the tactical plot. Half the human fleet was burning. Thousands of humans must have died in that hour. He composed himself, smoothing his robes, and opened the channel to the Indomitable. "Admiral Vance," Kalen said, his voice trembling with a mix of gratitude and profound fear. The threat is neutralized. You have saved us. We are in your debt." The video feed flickered on for the first time. Admiral Vance was not a being of light and elegance. He was an older human, his face scarred, covered in soot. He was wiping blood from a cut on his forehead with a dirty rag. He looked exhausted. He looked like a monster. "Just doing the job, High Speaker." Vance grunted, taking a sip from a battered metal flask. "Though next time, try to call us before the bugs are knocking on the front door. We had to redline the engines to get here." We did not think you would come," Kalen admitted. "The galaxy says you are volatile." Vance looked at the camera, and for a moment, his expression softened. "Yeah, well, the galaxy says a lot of things. But we have a saying on Earth. Demons run when a good man goes to war. We aren't the demons, Kalen. We're just the ones willing to get our hands dirty to kill them." "Your losses," Kalen said, looking at the sensor data. "You lost 12 cruisers, 3 destroyers, thousands of lives, for a species you do not know. Why?" Vance shrugged, a uniquely human gesture of dismissal. "Because you asked. And because there's no point in having big stick if you don't use it to help the little guy." Vance looked off screen as a damage report was shouted to him. "Look, we need to effect repairs before we jump back. Permission to dock at your orbital yards." Kalen hesitated. The thought of those massive, radiated, terrifying ships docking with the pristine glass spires of Sanctuary was horrifying. The humans were loud, dangerous, and violent. But he looked at the purple streaks in the atmosphere where the Krell Titan had burned up. He looked at the faces of his crew, who were alive because of the madness of the Sledgehammer Protocol. "Permission granted, Admiral," Kalen said, bowing his head. "And Admiral, yeah. Please teach us how to make the kinetic throwers, the ones with the solid slugs." Vance grinned. It was a predatory grin, filled with teeth, but it wasn't scary anymore. It was reassuring. "Railguns? Sure thing, kid. We'll leave you the blueprints. But be careful. They kick like a mule." The feed cut. In the days that followed, the story of the battle for Alien Prime spread across the galaxy. The distress signal had been answered, but the narrative had changed. The galaxy was no longer just horrified by the humans. They were still terrified, yes. The footage of men in power armor wrestling space bugs on the hull of a ship became the most watched video in Federation history. But there was a new understanding. Humanity was the monster in the dark. They were the crazy, violent, unstable relatives of the Galactic family who kept shotguns under the table and drank rocket fuel. They were dangerous. But when the lights went out and the real monsters came scratching at the door, the entire galaxy realized something very important. It was good to have a monster of your own. The humans were loud, they were ugly, and their ships looked like flying bricks. But they were the only ones who ran toward the screaming. And as the repair crews of Alien Prime watched the human sailors patch their hulls with welding torches and duct tape, laughing and smoking in the vacuum of the airlocks, they realized that humanity fuck yeah wasn't a boast. It was a warning to the rest of the universe. If you pick a fight with the little guys, the humans are coming, and they are bringing rocks. The Alien Council eventually formally recognized the Sol system. They even sent an ambassador to Earth. The ambassador reported back that the planet was a death trap of weather and gravity. The food was poisonous. Something called chili nearly killed him. And the culture was chaotic. But in the center of the alien capital, a new statue was erected. It wasn't made of glass or light. It was made of unpolished, ugly iron. It depicted a human soldier, armor dented, holding a line against a tide of monsters. The plaque beneath it didn't speak of peace or harmony. It read simply, "When the void stared at us, terror stared back." And that, to the horror and relief of the galaxy, was enough.